how often are you studying your Book of Mormon? How often do you pray? I says, I pray daily, Bishop. I pray for guidance that I will read the right things, that I'll draw the right conclusions, that I'll have my best mental faculties available to understand all the information that's out there. So I think I kind of gave him good feedback there. So the next question really took me off guard, and that was, who have you been talking to, Lyndon? Okay, damage control. Okay, and I gave him I had about 25 pages worth of notes I'd made, which I gave to him at that point. These are some questions I have, Bishop. If you can help me, I'd appreciate it. And I was sincere. I was not being facetious or just looking for a fight. I thought, he's an ecclesiastical leader here. He should be able to help me find the answers to these questions, if there are any answers to these questions. I'll say up front, the battle here, the escalation of conflict here that I'm going to describe was never personal. That I like these men. I think they're good men, and I think they're always good men. They want to do the right thing, but they're crippled. Okay, and just a preface to the rest of my remarks. So, what happened next was really by surprise. The bishop. So, yeah, okay. So he called the bishops of all my brothers. Because I told him I'd been talking to my brothers, and I had an online discussion group. He called all the bishops of my brothers, and suggested that each of my brothers receive a visit from the bishop and determine their level of commitment to see if there was some plot against the church that we were hatching, and we were going to destroy them, or so. I don't know what kind of threat there could possibly be from a band of brothers who are just sharing information and trying to understand our way through this life. That he would step in and do that, to me was incredible. I confronted him. I said, I demand an apology. This has caused problems and is potentially disastrous for my family relations. This is a breach of confidentiality. I thought I was talking to you in confidence. The way I was trying to find my way through this maze of facts and information. And he basically refused. He said, no, I went to the handbook of instructions, and it says that I am to protect the good name of the church. Okay? I don't know what planet the church has a good name on, but anyway, but that was his mission. That's what he said was his reasoning. Okay. So I found out that confidentiality is a myth. Okay. Confidentiality is a Hollywood thing, or it's part of some other church, but it's not part of Mormonism. Interestingly, it was interesting that he took my dissent as disloyalty immediately. And at this point, I was not disloyal. I wanted to continue to come. I wanted to continue to inject interesting information and help other members see a wider view of reality. And I wanted to be there for my family. I had no plans to stop coming to church and to stop participating at that point. And I was not disloyal. But it was interpreted as disloyalty, and that was disappointing to me. What followed next was sort of an escalation of testosterone, probably between me and the bishop and the stake president. There were follow-up visits with the bishop, and then I went to see the stake president. He asked me the same question. Smarter men than you, Lyndon, have gone through these things, and et cetera, et cetera. So I got the same thing over and over again. I'm not sure if they have the same training classes or what, but they pretty much read from the same script, it seemed to me. So my big issue here was I wanted to spare my mother any pain, and I told the bishop and the stake president I was planning to do a very prolonged discovery phase. It'd be at least 5 years, I told them, before I'd be done, based on the rate and the number of books I wanted to read. And the reason I said 5 years is because they'd both had their callings for at least 3 years, so I knew they'd be out. And basically give them the expectation that I was going to be around for at least their entire time while they had their positions. The bishop had put me on restriction at that point. He said that I could not exercise the priesthood outside the home, that I could not give any prayers in public, and that I could not teach any lessons or hold any callings. And the more I thought about that, the more it made my blood boil. I had just as much right to pray as anybody who walked through that door, that they had. So I ignored their restrictions, and I prayed when any called on me, and I spoke up often, and I didn't care. And I continued to bring books, and I started to bring results of my research to church. I tuck it in my pocket. At this point, I had a timeline that I'd constructed, drawing some of the key events and showing threads of logic and patterns with the church, and a 28-page, I think, summary of my findings. I'd stuff a copy of that in my pocket, my coat pocket every week, and then somebody'd say, "How you doing, Lyndon? What's going on?" I said, "I've been doing some research about the history of the church. Would you like to see it?" And I never got a no. Okay, always a yes. I'd give them the research. I probably distributed a half a dozen. And so the conflict continued to escalate. I'm sure it got back to the bishop and stake president over time. In October of 2006, it was my son's ordination for priest. He was turning 16. And, of course, I wasn't going to be blackmailed. And so it was kind of an embarrassment for my son. But I think we talked about this some during the session already, but the priesthood thing, that was Joseph Smith, that was brilliant, making every man a medicine man and having us buy into that, accept that responsibility and that ownership, and then also it's a manipulation tool because now the father is expected to be worthy at all times to do the baptisms, to do the ordinations, to do the blessings, okay, and so on and so forth. And it became crystal clear to me at that point. The next big event for me was PBS the Mormons, okay? And a lot of you remember that. The timing for me was just perfect because all the issues that I'd been researching were now out in the open, okay? It had been discussed on television in everybody's home, and I could not wait to go to church the next Sunday after the airing of PBS the Mormons, okay? I was more excited than a little kid on Christmas morning, and I was not disappointed when I got there. I cornered my high priest group leader as soon as I got there. I said, "Did you watch it? What did you think?" And he said, "Oh, I watched about 30 minutes and I got sick to my stomach. I had to turn it off. It was so biased to the anti-side, I could not stand it." I'm like, okay. And I argued with him for a minute, but that's irrelevant. So then during the meeting, it came up 6 times. I counted. It came up 6 times during the 3-hour block. A woman who'd been a convert to the church in the last year had seen the program, and she'd had a conference in Provo and had an appointment to meet with Uncle Bob, Robert D. Hales, okay? And she said, I'm very overwhelmed by all this information. Nobody told me about all this stuff when I was converted, going back to deception for new recruits, okay? Don't get the whole story. And this is what Elder Hales told her. He said, "Isn't it a testimony, sister, that we have such a colorful and controversial history, and yet we have so many faithful members?" Anyway, so for what it's worth, that came up. And then in high priest group, this was very funny. They were starting the lesson, and a brother got up and said, "Before we start the lesson, I just want to make a comment about PBS the Mormons." He said, "I thought this was the most fair, the greatest missionary tool we could possibly have. I think this is a chance to use as a springboard to talk to all our neighbors about the church." And he says this was such a nice program. They did such a good job. And went on and on about it for about 5 minutes. And there was the high priest group leader who tuned out after 30 minutes. And it was just funny. So